Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Strawberry Hill Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Simmons, and as always, we're here at the Shop Cigar Lounge. Come and see us if you ever get a chance. Before we get started, make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Make sure you follow us on all social media platforms at Strawberry Hill Podcast. And we have been off for, 3 weeks now? And we are back, and I am so excited to talk to you. We got the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, Mr. Bob Kendrick himself. It's my pleasure to even meet you, and I'm glad that you took the time out to come here. I appreciate this.
Man, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah. So, how you been? I know the knee is getting better, but how's life been in your world?
You know, it slowed down considerably after I had multiple knee surgeries to try and fix a ruptured patella tendon, but we're still as busy as ever at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And so outside of it interrupting my travel schedule, it hasn't interrupted very much else. So I get in there and I hop around and I still meet my guests, and I'm still doing a lot of meetings. Of course, these days, so many of these meetings are digital, some digital platforms. So I've been able to kind of stay connected with everything that's going on. And it's such an important time for the museum because we're getting ready to build a new Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And so there's a lot of interest in the museum. Interest in Negro Leagues history, I think, is at an all-time high. So outside of a little temporary setback with the knee injury, everything else is
temporary, yes. So where is the new museum going to be located?
It's going to be right around the corner from where we currently operate. The historic Purcell YMCA, 1824 Purcell. That is where the Negro Leagues were established in 1920.
I did not know that.
A guy named Andrew Rube Foster led a contingent of 8 independent black baseball team owners into a meeting there at the Purcell YMCA. And out of that meeting came the birth of the Negro National League, the first successful organized black baseball league. And so when people sometimes ask me why a Negro Leagues museum is in Kansas City, it is because Kansas City is the birthplace of the Negro Leagues. Well, that building had been abandoned for years. The old Coaches Council was the last organization operating in that building in the early, maybe to mid-1970s. It had been boarded up and abandoned. We took ownership of that building. We've started to renovate that building. We're going to convert it into the Buck ONEIL Education and Research Center, and then we will build a new museum adjacent to the historic landmark where it all began, creating what I call the nation's first Negro Leagues campus as the gateway into historic 18th and Vine.
That is awesome.
And an international headquarters for both black baseball and social history. And, of course, we just recently announced that there will be a Marriott Tribute Hotel built into the new Negro Leagues Baseball Museum.
Really?
One of its developers, Hall of Famer Reggie Jackson.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, Reggie Jackson's going to be one of the hotel developers.
Is that one of the reasons why he was down here?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
His father played in the Negro Leagues. Cup of coffee guy. He wasn't a superstar like his son was a superstar, but he still played. He still played. He played for the Newark Eagles. He was the team's traveling secretary, and he also drove the bus. So we're excited about the growth opportunities for a museum, Mike, that started in a one-room office in 1990.
One room office.
A little tiny one-room office, man. Guys like the late, great Buck ONEIL and other local Negro Leaguers who were still with us at that time. It's so sad to think that they've all passed on. All the guys who used to call Kansas City home, they've all passed on, but they literally took turns paying the monthly rent to keep that little office open. And that's how we got started. And then, of course, we built our current home that we moved into in November of 1997. So we went from a one-room office to what our guests now discover is about 10,000 square feet of exhibit space. So it's not an overwhelmingly large footprint, but within that footprint is a lot of information. And of course, along that journey, today we are recognized as America's national Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, as deemed and designated so by the United States Congress in 2006. And so it's been a tremendous journey for a little museum that no one gave any chance of succeeding.
You guys came a long way.
And now we're on the cusp of building this substantial Negro Leagues campus. The new museum is going to be over 30,000 square feet of space.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is, so when is it going to be done?
As soon as I raise this $35 million.
$35 million. All right, yeah, we got it covered. Don't worry, we'll get you $35 million. Eastside, you looking for 33? You looking for 35? So, have you been with the organization since the beginning?
Almost. I started, believe it or not, as a volunteer in 1993. Who knew? Who knew that you go from being a volunteer to now trying to lead what I think is one of the most important cultural institutions in the world? And I'll never forget walking into that one-room office there at Historic 18th Vine, the old Lincoln Building, which is where the museum was established, inside the Lincoln Building. And I remember walking into that one-room office, and as I share with a lot of the student audiences that I talked to, little did I know that I had literally just walked into what would become my passion.
Yeah.
I fell in love with the museum. I fell in love with its mission. And even more so, I fell in love with the people who made this history. I was just blown away by how little I knew about the history of this game and its connections to the history of this country. I was no different than most people who come to see us. I knew that there was a Negro Leagues, and you knew names such as Satchel Paige, Cool Papa Bell, Josh Gibson.
Cool Papa Bell. What a name.
One of the great names of all time. Because those are transcending names. Most baseball fans have at least heard those names. Now, they may not know how great they really were, but you likely heard those names. But I had no idea about the breadth, the depth, the scope, the magnitude that this history represented both on and off the field. And I guess you could say became enamored with it. I was engrossed with it. I wanted to learn as much as I could, and I didn't want to keep it to myself. But I had no idea that it was going to turn into a career.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to assist the museum in any way that I could. But, Mike, I was not unlike most people. You meet Buck O'Neill, and once you meet Buck O'Neill, it was love at first sight.
Yeah.
Or as I say, once you're bitten by the Buck bug, it's a wrap. There's no antidote for it. And I just wanted to be on Buck's team, and as fate would have it, it turned into one of the most gratifying things I think I could have ever done, either personally or professionally, to have this affiliation. But it's been 32 years of involvement with this museum.
So I'm going to go back to Buck O'Neill, and I know we were talking a little bit before the cameras start rolling of how Buck knew everybody, right? And I had a little funny story because my dad we went to some event where Buck O'Neill was at, and I'm like, I think I'm 6 or 7 years old. And he introduces me, and we're talking. I'm thinking he's family or uncle because that was Buck. It was Buck, and I didn't know at that time who it was really. And I remember he signed a baseball for me, and I was just like, oh, my dad was like, keep that baseball, don't ever lose that. And I never knew the magnitude of Buck O'Neill until I got older. And I guess my question is how. Like, what kind of treasure was it just having Buck O'Neill around, especially in our own backyard in Kansas City?
I tell people this all the time, I cannot believe that they paid me to hang out with Buck O'Neill. No, man, that's something that I would have done for free. I don't know if Kansas City realized what a jewel we had up until the Ken Burns documentary on the history of baseball came out, and Buck exploded on the scene. He stole the show, and Ken would be the first to tell you that Buck stole the show, because here was this very charming, gentle man who was telling these wonderful stories to baseball fans that they'd never heard before. And he was doing it with a twinkle in his eye and a smile that lit up the screen. And America fell in love with Buck. He was 82 years old at that time, and I'll never forget the headline in the Kansas City Star said, "A star is born at 82."
At 82.
Yeah, when most of us are shutting it down. It rejuvenated a new career for Buck, and the good Lord blessed him to be healthy enough to travel all over this country for the next 12 years, where he was literally gallivanting across this country and preaching the gospel of the Negro Leagues and the virtues of his museum to any and everybody who would listen. And I guess you could say, Mike, I was hanging from the hem of his garment.
Yeah.
And now I get to preach the gospel of Buck's Museum, the gospel of the Negro Leagues and the virtues of Buck's Museum to any and everybody who listens. And so Buck was as influential part of my life as anyone. Yeah, I still treasure those times that I got to spend with Buck ONEIL, the wisdom.
Yeah, I'm sure you've learned so many stories, heard so many stories.
The smartest thing I ever did was I kept my mouth closed and I listened.
That's one of the old sayings. Yeah, keep your mouth closed and you'll learn a lot more.
But he was one of the most amazing human beings to ever walk the face of this earth, who just happened to be a great baseball player.
And so he played for the Monarchs.
He did. He started for the Monarchs. He came to Kansas City in 1938. So he started his Negro Leagues career in 1937 with the Memphis Red Sox. And the Monarchs brilliantly made the move to trade for Buck and bring him over to Kansas City, where he had an affiliation with Kansas City from 1938 until that 94-year-old body expired in 2006. It was a love affair. And Buck says when he came to Kansas City, he said, I knew that I was coming to the heart of America. But when he got to 18th and Vine, he said, I never knew I was coming to the center of the universe, because 18th and Vine was jumping. And he was a part of that. And you could tell how proud he was to be a Monarch and to have played in the Negro Leagues, because it meant something to be a Monarch. Yeah, no, a kid growing up aspired to, a black kid growing up aspired to play for the Kansas City Monarchs, just like a white kid aspired to play for the New York Yankees. It was that same magnitude, that same scale, that same scope.
Yeah, and the Kansas City Monarchs, they were the team back in the day. They were the team. Yeah.
They were one of the greatest baseball franchises, not in black baseball history, but in baseball history.
Really?
One losing season in their almost 40-year existence in the Negro Leagues.
I know that.
And, man, that was during World War II, when so many of their stars had gotten called into service. Yeah, they sent more players to the major leagues than any other Negro League franchise. They were a model organization. There are those who will say that the Kansas City Monarchs were the New York Yankees of the Negro Leagues. There are others who will say that the New York Yankees were the Kansas City Monarchs of Major League Baseball. They were that good. And it's been just amazing to see how the legacy of the Monarchs still plays on here in Kansas City.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that about the Monarchs. And then now they're still good. I mean, they're out there winning titles.
The minor league American Association minor league team that we rebranded as the Kansas City Monarchs. They were the former Kansas City T-Bones, and we rebranded them as the Kansas City Monarchs. So it has kept that name alive for a new generation of baseball fans to identify with that history. And I think for a museum, that's what you have to do, because we have to continue to find ways to make this history relevant. Negro Leagues baseball hadn't been played in over 6 decades, but the life lessons that stem from this story of triumph over adversity are as important today as ever before. But we have to make it relevant to this generation so that they could connect and identify with it.
Yeah, and that was one of my questions too, is like, because the longer we get away from the Negro Leagues and baseball, like the harder it is to connect to the generation. So what are you like? I guess what do you guys do, and what are your plans for getting more people involved? Because you guys talk about you need a donation. And you need people to come down to see the museum. And,
I'm so proud that we've kind of understood. I think a lot of museums don't really get it. They think it's just got to be history for history's sake. That ain't going to cut it. And so one of the biggest things that we've ever done was we put the Negro Leagues in the video game MLB The Show.
I know. That happened last year?
Well, we started it in 2023.
Yeah.
I've got a 5-year partnership with Sony, and it is by far one of the biggest initiatives we've ever embarked on, because now millions upon millions of young people and young adults are not only learning about the Negro Leagues, but they are falling in love with the Negro Leagues because we put it in a mode and medium in which they were accustomed to engaging with. And it has been tremendous. We still have 2 more years of this partnership. It's gone so well. It has been the most talked about feature of MLB The Show. And honestly, it has made me a household name in the gaming community because I'm in the video game telling stories. Yeah, now I saw myself doing a lot of things. I never dreamt that I would be in a video game. And every day since this game has been released, I get kids coming to that museum because they saw the museum in the video game and they want to meet the guy that's telling stories in the video game.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing. So the first year in 2023, we had 8 players. In 24, 10 players. And in 25, 8 more players added to the game. But Sony was really smart on how they integrated the players into the game. They didn't just throw them in the game and just throw stats randomly with them. They created a mode called storylines. Yeah. And they literally had me sit down and tell stories about these players and then other little vignettes that are related to the Negro Leagues. And they put a killer soundtrack behind it, and voila, you awesome. Got them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got them. Yeah.
And so what I think also helps too is when they integrated the Negro League stats
into Major League Baseball.
Yeah. And so that just changed the whole
Well, it did
sculpture.
because it opened the eyes to a lot of baseball fans to the Negro League. So there have been these milestones that have continued to occur in and around Negro Leagues. That's why I say Negro Leagues history is as hot now as it has ever been before. And so you're right. Last May 29th, it became official when the stats of the Negro Leagues were integrated into the record books of Major League Baseball. So now your all-time career-leading batting average is Josh Gibson at 372. Single-season batting record of 466 in 1943. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that ain't going to be broken.
Yeah. We were talking about that not too long ago. Of like, there's a lot of baseball records that probably will never be broken. That one ain't going to be broken. No. Yeah, that one, especially 466 in the season, that ain't going to be broken.
And what makes it even more remarkable, particularly if you're a fan of the game, Josh Gibson was a catcher. Catchers don't do that. No, you get one or the other, power or average, but rarely do you get the combination of the two because the position's so physically demanding. Yeah. It beats your body up. Gibson wasn't a good catcher. He was a great catcher, rifle arm. So he's throwing guys out from the crouch back in that era. Buck O'Neill would say he had complete control of his pitching staff, so he called a great game and was a good running catcher. He going to steal you 20, 25 bases or more to go with that big bat of his. And as I tell my guests, when I say big bat, I mean big bat. 40 ounce, 41 inches. Oh, man, yeah, you got to be a man to swing that kind of lumber. And when you look at the photos of Josh, he's not choking up. He's got it gripped down below the knob. Big, massive hands, big, powerful forearms, big, powerful thighs, and great eyes. Buck O'Neill would describe Josh Gibson in this fashion, that he had the eyes of Ted Williams and the power of Babe Ruth rolled into one dynamic package. His outs, as we say in the game, were loud outs. The third baseman and the shortstop were damn near in left field when Gibson came up because you're not creeping in on Josh. I guess you could say that was the Negro Leagues version of a shift. Yeah, they basically said, Josh, if you want to bunt it, you can have it because you ain't creeping in on it because you might get killed. Now, he didn't strike out a lot like they do today. Gibson might strike out 20, 25 times in a season. Yeah, no, he, in my own humble opinion, the greatest combination of power and average this game has ever seen. Yeah,
and I had a question too about Bob Gibson. Is, do you think that he is the home run king?
In my
because that,
humble opinion, I think so.
He said it was like over 800.
Yeah. And see, when they changed it, when they put the stats in, they didn't give him credit for all of his home runs because he played against everybody. Major leaguers, town teams, Negro Leagues. So the stats only look at the official numbers that they were able to ascertain from official league games. He might have hit 1,000 home runs in his career. Yeah.
And how long did he play?
He played almost 18 seasons, and he dies when he was 35 years old.
He died when he was 35 years old?
Yeah, he was just a baby. He died from a brain tumor.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he had a stroke. The brain tumor caused a stroke. And
was he still playing at the time?
Before he got too sick to play. He was still playing, and you hear all these misnomers that he was a alcoholic drug addict. It's not true. Buck O'Neill would say of Josh that he was never more than just a social drinker, but he was having severe headaches, and nothing over the counter would alleviate the pain. So he did start self-medicating to some extent with alcohol, but he's been terribly misportrayed. Yeah, no, he was a gentle giant. Yeah, gentle giant, and one of the greatest this game has ever seen.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we have people like you to tell that story, because I'm sure that that myth's probably been going around for years,
for decades.
And so you mentioned Satchel Paige earlier, and I read something. I think it was on your page that he came into the MLB at 42, and it could have been 52.
Yeah, because it still remains an age-old mystery of just how old Satchel really was. Baseball says he was born in July 7th, 1906, which I absolutely do not believe. Satchel, we have his original tombstone at the museum on display. And when you get to the tombstone, you'll see that there's a question mark by his birthday. The old man literally took it with him to his grave. Most who knew him believed that he was at least 10 years older than what he claimed to be. And he gets to the major leagues, whether it was 42 or 52, in 1948, with then the Cleveland Indians, of course, the Cleveland Guardians today. He gets called up on what we believe was his 42nd birthday, July 7th of 1948. He goes 6-1 with a 2.4 ERA at age 42, which means he was likely closer to 52.
That's wild.
Yeah, and many thought he should have been named Rookie of the Year. Yeah, he was incredible. And if you go back to 1948, Cleveland would win the World Series in 1948. They were led by Larry Doby and Satchel Paige, but they were in a hotly contested pennant race. And if Satchel doesn't do what he does, they don't get to the World Series. They don't win the pennant without Satchel. And then, of course, they would go on to win the World Series. And my Cleveland fans, y'all, get tired of hearing me say this. That was the last time Cleveland won the World Series, was in 1948.
All with the help of Satchel Paige.
Satchel Paige and the great Larry Doby. Larry Doby would integrate the American League just weeks after Jackie. He's the forgotten man.
Yeah.
But that is how we are in our society. We always celebrate the first. We rarely ever remember the second guy. And, of course, if you're number 16, you can pretty much forget it. Larry Doby went through just as much. Some might even argue even more than Jackie, because he was playing in the American League. And the American League wasn't nearly as liberal as the National League, nor did it have the major urban centers like the National League did, nor was the national media following Larry.
Really?
They were following Jackie.
And why is that? Just because Jackie was
Because he was the first.
Gotcha.
Larry comes up on July 5th of 1947. Larry Doby.
Jackie came on April
15th of 1947. And Larry Doby was 23 years old, a baby thrown into a powder keg of racism. He never played not one day in the minor leagues. He went straight from Effa Manley's Newark Eagles over to Cleveland. Yeah, and he handled himself with the same grace, class, and dignity that we rightfully celebrate Jackie for having demonstrated. But he's like the second man that walked on the moon.
You don't ever hear about it.
You don't. No, because he is. He's the second man to walk on the moon. See, for black folks, Jackie Robinson's breaking of the color barrier carried the same level of euphoria that we saw when Neil Armstrong, collectively saw when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. Jackie was our Neil Armstrong. Well, as I tell my guests, Larry Doby was our Buzz Aldrin, because Buzz walked on the moon too, and he walked just seconds after Neil Armstrong, and nobody remembers Buzz Aldrin. And coincidentally, they both lived in Montclair, New Jersey, Buzz Aldrin and Larry Doby.
That's wild. Man, I love hearing these stories. This is great. And I know I saw a video of you, and you were talking about how Jackie Robinson, when he integrated in baseball, that was pretty much one of the first civil rights movements ever, because it was 20 years before anything Martin Luther King did. And at that time, it was like early, 1940s.
In the 40s, 47. And as my friend Buck O'Neill would say, and the museum makes that same rather bold assertion that Jackie's breaking of the color barrier wasn't just a part of the civil rights movement, that it was actually the beginning of the civil rights movement in this country, because for what you just mentioned, this predates those more noted civil rights occurrences. So this is before Brown versus the Board of Education. This is before Rosa Parks' refusal to move to the back of the bus. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was merely a sophomore at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, when Jackie signed his contract to play in the Dodgers organization. And of course, our very own President Harry S. Truman, born right up the road from where we are now, Independence, Missouri, would not integrate the armed forces until a year after Jackie. So for all intensive purposes, this is what started the ball of social progress rolling in our country, baseball. And our country literally jumped on the coattail of baseball. And of course, Jackie was handpicked from the great Kansas City Monarchs to be that chosen one. And that surprises so many of our visitors. I really believe that people think that Jackie just walked out of nowhere and started playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers. But his real rookie season was here in Kansas City in 1945. Now, he was only here for 5 months, but the 5 months he spent in Kansas City, he fell in love with everything that Kansas City is famous for, barbecue and jazz. He liked the ribs at a place called Old Kentuck Barbecue. Old Kentuck Barbecue will become the forerunner of the great Gates barbecue chain of restaurants that are world-renowned here in Kansas City to this day. And I'm going to say that he fell deeper in love with jazz, because I do believe that he was already a jazz aficionado. But while New Orleans may lay claim to jazz, Kansas City gave jazz his soul. And 5 months later, he was gone. He had literally disappeared. And I have been so blessed to have known several of his 1945 Monarch teammates. They've all passed on now, but if they were with us today, they would tell you that when Jackie joined the Monarchs, there was no fanfare surrounding him whatsoever. He was just another ball player trying to make the great Kansas City Monarchs roster, but they knew he was different than they were. And Buck O'Neill would surmise it in this fashion. He would say that we had become acclimated to segregation, but not Jackie Robinson. You see, Jackie Robinson was Pasadena, California. He's UCLA. So this whole Jim Crow thing didn't sit well with him whatsoever. But beyond that, that was it. And 5 months later, he was gone. He had literally disappeared. His teammates had no idea where he was. Of course, we now know that he was meeting with Branch Rickey, where the two of them would make that monumental decision that he would become the chosen one to break Major League Baseball's then 6-decade-long self-imposed color barrier.
And I wonder, when we go back to that, and I know you talked to Buck O'Neill a lot, what did he have to say about the whole segregation? Because I'm sure he probably thought, like, this is never going to happen.
I think prior to Jackie's integration of the game, it was just a pipe dream for those players. Matter of fact, I dare to say, I don't even know if they thought about. They had their own league. They were doing their own thing, even though there was some under the surface level rumblings that maybe it could happen. There were other major league owners who had thought about it. Clark Griffith over in D.C., where he owned the Washington Senators, he had thought about it because he wanted to sign Buck Leonard and Josh Gibson because he was watching them do these incredible things in his ballpark. He's watching Leonard play a dazzling first base, hitting line drives all over the ballpark. He's watching Gibson hit balls where no mere mortal had ever hit them. And so he had tinkered with the notion. But then he thought about this. The Homestead Grays were outdrawing the Washington Senators in their own ballpark.
Really?
Outdrawing them. And he's getting a percentage of the gate and likely all of the concessions. So he was in this bit of a quandary. If I sign or I attempt to sign Leonard and Gibson, his Senators instantly move to the forefront of pennant condition, to have a chance to win the pennant. But do I want to fight with the other owners, and do I want to lose this source of revenue? Because he's making this money, and he didn't have to work to get this money. And I think that is why it took so long. And the timing may not have been quite right. See, when Ricky makes the move to bring Robinson, we had come out of World War II. And there was this prevailing sentiment that if they could die fighting for their country, black folks,
why can't they play
why
baseball?
can't they play baseball in this country? And that is what really kind of created the groundswell of support for integrating America's national pastime. And so the timing was probably more appropriate for Ricky than it would have been for Clark Griffith, but they were all grappling with whether or not I wanted to lose this source of revenue. One of the reasons it took so long to integrate the game is that Major League Baseball teams were making money from the Negro Leagues because the Negro Leagues were renting their ballpark, and in many cases they were filling up their ballparks.
And they were playing at night too, weren't they?
Well, our very own J.L. Wilkinson, who owned the Kansas City Monarchs, pioneered night baseball in the Negro Leagues 5 years before they ever played a night game in the Major Leagues. They were doing that in the Negro Leagues, playing those games under the lights.
Yep. Which is crazy. There's so many good stuff. I'm so glad that you were here. So when you talked about, Satchel Paige and then Larry Doby, and then how he was kind of like the second person to come on. Are there players that people tend to forget about him that should be mentioned in those, great Negro League players?
What is so eye-opening is that there were 5 guys who go up in 1947. See, we only talk about Jackie.
Yeah.
But Larry Doby, Hank Thompson, Willard Brown, and Dan Bankhead all go up in 1947. They're the answers to a trivia question. And even more so, who was the first black pitcher in the major leagues? Most people assume that it was Satchel. It was Dan Bankhead in 1947. He would join Jackie with the Brooklyn Dodgers. But nobody ever talks about those guys. And so we created an exhibition that's on display at the museum called Barrier Breakers that chronicles all of baseball's integration pioneers. Because as we tend to do as a society, we celebrate the first. We just don't ever remember the second. And so we wanted to make sure that they were more than just a footnote in baseball and American history. And if we don't tell their stories, who will?
And so, and I know that, the Negro Leagues was formed when?
1920.
And then I know they were playing before that.
Yeah, no, we've been playing baseball for a long time. It was not a new phenomena for us to be playing baseball. We've been playing baseball, you can go back and trace it to us even as enslaved people. Yeah, so there were professional teams that were starting to form. It was just so haphazard. There was no structure in place. So, you tried to get a game anywhere that you could get a game. The booking agents were taking all the money. And then the push for organized baseball came for black baseball. And that's what Rube Foster was able to do in 1920. He convinced these other independent black baseball team owners to give up their independency. He had to be a masterful salesman to do this because they were already making money. But Rube had to convince them that in order for black baseball to not only survive, but thrive, it needed to have an organized structure.
Yeah.
And that's what he was able to accomplish in that meeting held at the Paseo YMCA. They came out having established the Negro National League.
And what do you think, and I'm just coming off the cusp because I want to ask, what do you think is the most important event for Negro League baseball?
Well, there's several. I think what Foster was able to do to charter a new organized black baseball league is tremendously significant. It makes him one of the most influential figures in baseball history, but nobody ever talks about him. Rube Foster, in my own opinion, is the most brilliant baseball mind this sport has ever seen. And he is the rarest of baseball figures because he would have gone in the Hall of Fame as a player, as a manager, and as an executive.
Jeez.
And you don't find many, if any, that check all three boxes. He had been a great pitcher himself in the early era of black baseball. As a matter of fact, he is credited with having invented what we now know to be the screwball. Back then it was called a fadeaway. And Rube perfected this pitch. So much so that the great Major League manager John McGraw would sneak Rube into his camp so that Rube Foster could teach Christy Mathewson how to throw the screwball. Christy Mathewson threw the pitch all the way into the National Baseball Hall of Fame that he learned from Rube Foster. But Foster was best known as this visionary, this tremendous leader. He would organize the Negro Leagues. He would become president of his newly formed Negro National League. He owned the Chicago American Giants, and he managed the Chicago American Giants. And as a manager, he was so tremendously savvy to the point that he was known to fine his ball players at the turn of the 1900s as much as $5 if you were tagged out standing up. Oh, no. You were supposed to slide. Rube would draw a circle down the first base line and a circle down the third base line. And if every one of his players couldn't drop a bunt inside the circle, he would fine them. He was adamant about the style of play that would become signature to Negro Leagues baseball. Fast, aggressive, daring. They bunt their way on. They're going to steal second. They steal third. And, man, if you weren't too smart, they were stealing home. And that was the style of play that drew both black and white fans who sat side by side during an era when doing something socially together was virtually unheard of. Negro Leagues baseball brought the two races together. That's the irony of this great story. Here's a league born out of segregation that will become the driving force for social change in this country. You see, if we were allowed in to watch a major league game, we were separated by chicken wire. So black fans were going to sit either down the left or right field lines, and then we'd be separated from white fans who sat in the rest of the ballpark with a chicken wire barrier. But at Negro League games, more times than not, we were sitting side by side watching what many would say the best baseball being played in this country, without question the most entertaining brand of baseball that was being played in this country. And that all goes back to Rube Foster, who, again, I believe is one of the most influential people in, I dare to say, sports history, but certainly baseball history. And if you're going to look at another milestone, Gus Greenlee and his establishment of the East-West All-Star Game. That was the Negro League's version of the All-Star Game.
My dad has a picture of all of them, and it's all the All-Star Game, and I think that's so cool.
They played that game at Chicago's Comiskey Park. It was established in 1933, the same year that Major League Baseball's All-Star Game started. And as I remind my guests, yes, it did outdraw Major League Baseball's All-Star Game. Oh, guys, they would put over 50,000 fans in Chicago's Comiskey Park for the Negro League's version of the All-Star Game, one of the greatest sporting events in American sports history. And it led Negro Leagues to another height, you know, with that establishment, because now we're coming out of the Great Depression. And Negro Leagues baseball just exploded back on the scene again, all the way up until the time that integration occurs.
Yeah, and so what was the last year for Negro Leagues baseball?
We say officially 1960, although there were the Monarchs and the Indianapolis Clowns who were still barnstorming up until the 70s. But officially, we say the leagues ended in 1960.
And then Indianapolis Clowns, was it like a Globetrotter team?
They were the Harlem Globetrotters.
So they were like the Savannah Bananas before the Savannah Bananas.
Pretty much where the Savannah Bananas got it from.
Yeah.
And they were owned and promoted by the same guys who had the Harlem Globetrotters, Abe Saperstein and Sid Pollock.
And then Hank Aaron played for
the Indianapolis Clowns.
Yeah.
He comes to the Clowns from Mobile, Alabama, a skinny, cross-handed hitting shortstop. So if you haven't heard that term before, he was a right-hand hitter who was hitting with his left hand on top. And, of course, that is unorthodox. The fear is that you break your wrist hitting in that manner. Henry Aaron was knocking the cover off the baseball in a highly unorthodox fashion. When he gets to the Clowns, they put the right hand on top, and the rest, as they say, is history. He was shortly after discovered by the Boston Braves, who would become the Milwaukee Braves, who, of course, would become the Atlanta Braves. Henry Aaron will go down in this sport as one of the game's all-time greatest players, but it all began in the Negro Leagues 1952 with the Indianapolis Clowns.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't remember that or don't even think about that that's where he started his career.
That's where it started.
And I think a lot of Major League Hall of Famer baseball, black players started their career.
Yeah, Willie Mays was 17 years old patrolling center field for the Birmingham Black Barons. When you talk Willie Mays and Henry Aaron, we're talking two of the biggest stars in Major League Baseball history, but their roots began in the Negro Leagues. And so if Jackie doesn't integrate in 1947, just think, if it's 10, 15, 20 years later, we would have missed Henry Aaron. We'd have missed Willie Mays, Ernie Banks, Roy Campanella, Bob Gibson. Yeah, we'd have missed Roberto Clemente.
Yeah.
Can you imagine our sport without those great stars?
No.
And if you can imagine what it was like before 1947, because they didn't learn how to play baseball after 1947. They were playing great baseball well before 1947. And I'd always said, had the doors opened sooner, the record books would be entirely different. Well, what happened last year? Major League Commissioner Rob Manfred opened the door, and now the record books are entirely different.
So, in your eyes, it's a two-part question. So, who do you think is the best Negro League baseball player?
Oh, wow.
And then who do you think is the best baseball player ever?
For my money, it's Josh Gibson. If there's any such thing as a five-tool catcher, it was Josh, because he could do everything. Buck ONEIL, for him, it was Oscar Charleston. Oscar Charleston was Willie Mays before we ever knew who Willie Mays was. Five-tool superstar. Hit for power, hit for average, could field, could run, could throw. In 1921, Oscar Charleston had one of the greatest single seasons, not in black baseball history, but in baseball history, when he led the Negro Leagues in home runs, triples, doubles, stolen bases, and batting average in the same season. No, he was
more than a triple crown.
Incredible. He was incredible. And Buck say he never saw a center fielder, including the great Willie Mays, who could go back on a ball the way Charleston could. Uncanny instincts. He just seemed to know where that ball was coming down right off the crack of the bat. So he played a very shallow center field. So you couldn't bloop it in front of him, and unless you hit it on a rope, you couldn't get it over his head. You remember the great catch that Willie Mays makes in the Polo Grounds in the World Series? And honestly, the throw was better than the catch. But everybody remembers the catch because it's called the catch, because he literally ran a country mile to make that great over-the-shoulder basket catch. Well, all the old-timers in the Negro League say, had that been Oscar Charleston, he'd have been waiting for that ball to come down.
That's good. And so, did he ever play in the MLB?
No. Integration occurred a little too late for him. Buck always believed that Willie Mays was the greatest major leaguer that he ever saw, but Charleston was the greatest baseball player that he ever saw.
And I think a lot of people say the same about Willie Mays, that he's
well, I mean, there was nothing that Mays couldn't do, and he was so likable. You know, he was one of the most, I think, revered baseball players of all time because he was so likable, so affable. I mean, who walks through the streets of Harlem and plays stickball with the kids? Willie Mays. He was never booed, even in the opponent's ballpark. I mean, that is how beloved Willie Mays was.
Yeah. And so, who do you think the best player from Kansas that went through Kansas City who is?
It has to be Satchel. Yeah, I don't even think there's very much question. Satchel Paige was the biggest star in a league filled with big stars. But he was the biggest and brightest because that's who everybody wanted to see. He would ride into towns, and the entire town was shut down to watch this man do his thing. So he was pitching 2 or 3 innings almost every single day because he was the drawing card. Everybody wanted to see the old man pitch, and he would always deliver. He would always deliver. And so I don't think there's very much doubt when we talk about Kansas City, and there have been so many tremendous stars that have come through our great city, none of them are bigger and brighter than Leroy Satchel Paige.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because how long did he play for?
Well, and I think that's the
He
thing.
probably 80s. Who knows?
You know, he pitched his last major league game in 1965 when he was reportedly 59 years old, if you believe that he was born in 1906, which I absolutely do not believe. But he pitches for the Kansas City A's. Charlie Finley brings Satchel back. And this was a marriage made in heaven. Because love him or hate him, Charlie Finley was one of the game's greatest promoters. Satchel was one of the game's greatest self-promoters. So this was a marriage made in heaven. He pitches 3 shutout innings against the Boston Red Sox, giving up only 1 hit in those 3 innings. Great trivia question. 1965 Boston Red Sox. Who got that lone hit off of Satchel? Hall of Famer, but it's not Ted Williams.
1965.
Yep. Carl Yastrzemski. Yes. Yaz gets a double against the old man, and Satchel left him at third and shut down everybody else over 3 of the most brilliantly pitched innings in Major League Baseball history. It didn't get the credence that it deserved because it was Charlie Finley. And of course, because the old man, everybody looked at it as a publicity stunt, but it wasn't. And I was doing an interview with Rico Petrocelli, who was on that 65 Red Sox team. And he told me this. He didn't play in that game, but he said everybody went to the plate hacking away at that old man. They thought it was going to be like batting practice. And he says at that time, Satchel's fastball was still 86, 87 miles per hour, and he's painting the black at age 59, which means he could have been 69 years old at the time.
Jeez.
Satchel said the only reason that he stopped pitching was his wife made him come home.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, and so you are, of course, you're a big baseball fan. So who is your favorite team?
I grew up in Georgia. I'm a native of Georgia. I grew up in a little town called Crawfordville, Georgia. Crawfordville is east of Atlanta, west of Augusta, all of 500 people. And so I'm a lifelong Braves fan. I've become a Royals fan since I made Kansas City home. And of course, the Royals are so very supportive of the museum. But I'm a lifelong Braves fan. And even as I was watching the All-Star game here recently, the game was played on 7/15. And no one does these wonderful ceremonies the way Major League Baseball does. And, of course, they honored the late, great Henry Aaron, my all-time favorite ball player and my childhood idol as a kid growing up in Crawfordville, Georgia. Every day on the playground, I wanted to be Henry Aaron.
Did you get to meet him?
Oh, yes, I did.
I'm going to say, that's probably the time you were starstruck.
Oh, man, it's the only time that I've ever been starstruck because every time I was around Henry Aaron, I was reduced to that almost 12-year-old kid that when he hit home run 715 in Atlanta's Fulton County Stadium, I'm at home in my mother's living room, and as he's circling the bases in Atlanta's Fulton County, I'm circling the bases right alongside him in my mother's living room. The old couch was first base. She had an old TV that was second base. The other old couch was third base, and her recliner was home plate. And as my childhood idol was touching them all, I'm touching them all too. And in 1999, I get to take him on a tour of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum.
Awesome.
Now, mind you, we've had 2 American presidents tour that museum. President Bill Clinton, former President George W. Bush, First Lady Michelle Obama, First Lady Laura Bush, General Colin Powell, former Vice President Al Gore, Maya Angelou, Nikki Giovanni. I mean, just an incredible number of distinguished guests who have walked through that museum. But with no disrespect to any of them, they are not Henry Aaron in the eyes, mind, and heart of this kid from Crawfordville, Georgia. I take he and his wife, Billy, on a tour of the museum. we go across the street to the Gym Theater for a fireside chat. And we were celebrating the 25th anniversary of him breaking Ruth's record in when we get to 1999. And sad to say, it took him 25 years before he could finally exhale and celebrate what many believe to be the greatest sports accomplishment in American sports history because of all the hate and vitriol that he received. A lot of people don't know that he got nearly 1 million pieces of hate mail. There were death threats. So he doesn't know if he's going to make it around the bases when he hit that home run. And if you remember the two white kids that run out on the field, everybody took a collective gasp because they thought they were coming out to do something to harm, but they were coming out to celebrate. And Mr. Aaron's personal bodyguard used to carry a binocular case around his neck. Inside the binocular case, he had a .38 snub-nosed pistol. And when those kids ran on the field, he had started to reach into the binocular case. There were snipers in the ballpark that night. And fortunately, cooler heads prevailed because one of the greatest sports accomplishments could have turned into one of the most tragic incidents in American sports history if someone had shot those kids. And you'll notice that when he gets to home plate, his mother is there to greet him. And watch how his mother strategically turns her back to home plate. She's prepared to take a bullet for her baby. That's a mother's love. Now, I would like to think that we as daddies would have done the same thing. I'm just not sure, but that's a mother's love right there. And as he would say, she gave him the biggest bear hug. He didn't know his mother could hug so hard. But, he couldn't celebrate that. And it took him 25 years later before he could exhale and celebrate that accomplishment.
That's crazy. I didn't know the whole story behind that.
Yeah, and then when we finish the fireside chat, we go up to the mezzanine level of the Gym Theater, and I get to sit down with my childhood idol over a platter of Gates barbecue ribs. Literally got to chew the fat with my all-time favorite ball player. So no, it doesn't get any better than that. No. So,
and I'm sure you've been to almost every baseball stadium around.
The only one I have left is New Yankee Stadium.
So what's been your favorite one so far?
PNC Park in Pittsburgh. It's just, I'm partisan to those ballparks where you can see the ball go out the stadium no matter where you sit. Kauffman Stadium is like that.
Yeah.
But when they light up the bridge and people walk across the bridge there in Pittsburgh, it is amazing. I love Petco Park, but I think I like Petco because it's in San Diego, and San Diego is one of my favorite cities. Yeah. But, there are some beautiful ballparks there. Kauffman Stadium is still a beautiful old ballpark. It's one of the older stadiums now.
Yeah, because I think we talked about it's like third or fourth oldest.
Yeah, only behind Wrigley, Fenway, Dodger Stadium, and the ballpark there in Anaheim.
So do you get to travel quite a bit with, being the president of the museum and going to, talk to people and meeting players still? I bet you that's just super cool.
It never gets old.
Yeah.
It never gets old, and I'm very blessed to do the work that I do. And every time I welcome a young major leaguer to the museum, it just fills my heart with joy. I feel like I'm carrying on for Buck. I watched Buck do that for years. And so every time we get a young major leaguer or an athlete of any sports discipline, really, it doesn't matter, because if you're black and you play a professional team sport in this country, all roads lead back to the Negro Leagues.
So what did you, going back to the All-Star game, what did you think about the game last night? Because we talked about it a little bit on the couch, and I think the coolest part of that game was the ending, how the swing off.
Yeah, because I didn't know initially how I felt about the swing off, but then when it happened, I'm like, oh man, this is cool. And to see how excited the other players were for that, I thought that was a great way, because it's still an exhibition game. And I was in Milwaukee when they called a game to tie and everybody went ballistic. It's still an exhibition game. Now, back in the day, it was highly competitive. The National League wanted to beat the American League. And the National League used to dominate the All-Star games, particularly right after integration, because the National League was far more aggressive, signing that black talent. and they were dominating the All-Star games, and then the National League started winning the World Series. The American League was very slow to integrate. They came in kicking and screaming.
Was it just because they were stubborn?
They were stubborn.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they were stubborn, and they were more reluctant to bring that black talent. They passed over a lot of superstar players because in some ways I think they wanted integration to fail, even at their own expense. Yeah, Boston was the last team to integrate in 1959.
Jeez.
12 years after Jackie breaks the color barrier. They signed a guy named Elijah Pumpsie Green, who was a good player, but they had their pick of the litter of star talent.
And they just kept skipping over everybody. And so was it, back then, was it just where they, like, you could just sign any player you kind of wanted to?
Well, it's really interesting because Branch Rickey, contrary to popular belief, he didn't sign Jackie from the Kansas City Monarchs. He took Jackie from the Kansas City Monarchs. He never paid, as my late mother would say, not one red cent for a ball player who was under contract. Rickey didn't think that the contracts in the Negro Leagues were valid, particularly as it related to playing in another league. And so the great Monty Irvin was really the player that Rickey wanted. Jackie became secondary. He wanted Monty Irvin. And quite frankly, Monty Irvin was a five-tool superstar with movie star good looks. He had everything you needed to be a star. Monty was playing for the Newark Eagles. Monty had just gotten back from World War II, and Rickey had snuck and signed him in 1944. Monty was suffering from what he would admit to be shell shock. Today we'd call it PTSD.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the PTSD that prevented Monty from being the first. It was a woman by the name of Effa Manley. Effa Manley owned the Newark Eagles. And to say that Effa Manley couldn't stand Branch Rickey might be an understatement. She didn't like Rickey at all. And to be honest, rightfully so, because she saw exactly what Rickey was going to do. Rickey was going to come into the Negro Leagues and essentially poach it for all of his talent without any compensation to those owners.
Yeah.
And she wasn't having it. She threatened to litigate. And Rickey backed off of Monty Irvin. That's when he turns his sight to Kansas City, to one Jackie Roosevelt Robinson. But here's how shrewd Rickey was. And Rickey has been hailed as a saint. And don't get me wrong, there was certainly some righteousness to Rickey, because this was going to be a bold move for him to try and bring a black man into Major League Baseball, because you knew you were going to have to fight the other owners. But Rickey was somewhere between a saint and a devil. But then again, aren't we all? And I've always believed that Rickey felt like the Kansas City Monarchs owner couldn't and wouldn't fight back. You know why? He was white. J.L. Wilkinson was a white man who made his entire living in black baseball. He cannot be the public face of blocking what every black person in America had been waiting for a black man to play in the major league. If he is the guy that blocks it, that fan base that had been so loyal to him, they would have turned their backs on him right away. And I think Rickey was banking on that. So he had Wilkie stuck between that proverbial rock and hard place. And so publicly, Wilkie said all the right things because he's got to protect his business interests. Privately, he is seething, but not because a black man's about to play in the major leagues. This black man you're going to take away from me, you're going to put me out of business. And he was absolutely right. He sells his interest in the Kansas City Monarchs in 1948, the year after Jackie breaks the color barrier, because the handwriting was on the proverbial wall. It wasn't a matter of if, it was just a matter of when the Negro Leagues were going to fold. But Rickey never paid for Jackie Robinson. Now, Bill Veeck came to get Larry Doby, and he offered Effa Manley $5,000. She writes him back And she says, Mr. Veck, you know, if Larry Doby was white, he'd be worth $100,000 or more. But if you think this $5,000 sum is fair, I guess I have no other recourse, because she now knows she's not going to be able to fight them all.
Mm-hmm.
As they say, the blood was in the water
Mm-hmm.
and the sharks were coming. Bill Veck, who had a heart for this, he writes her back. He says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you an additional $5,000 and I'll give Larry a $5,000 signing bonus if he makes the team. That is what then opens the door for other Negro League owners to start selling their commodity, their star players, to the major leagues. And it literally became a fire sale.
Yeah.
I got to try and grow
So it became like a farm
talent.
system.
Before the business of Negro Leagues dies. A lot of Negro League teams thought they might become a farm system, but Major League Baseball was never going to look at them as a farm. They had their own farm system already. And so they started trying to sell these players so that they could get something out of it before the business of black baseball died.
So whatever happened to Monty?
Monty would he would go to Branch Rickey's rival, the New York Giants, a few years later. He was 30 years old by the time he gets there. And he was a shell of himself, but he was still a tremendous player for the New York Giants. I wish baseball could have gotten Monty Irvin when he was 19, 20 years old. There was nothing he couldn't do. A young Roberto Clemente idolized Monty Irvin.
Really?
When Monty went to Puerto Rico, a young Roberto Clemente would carry Monty Irvin's uniform to the ballpark. Because if you carried the player's uniform, he would let you in the game for free. And Roberto Clemente would carry Monty Irvin's uniform. And Roberto Clemente Jr. says that Monty Irvin gave his dad his first real baseball glove, and that's who Roberto Clemente idolized. He wanted to be Monty Irvin. And I tell people, this only happens in baseball, and it speaks to the romanticism of baseball. When Roberto Clemente dies in the tragic plane accident, they waived the 5-year rule for him to go into the Hall of Fame. Who does he go in the Hall of Fame with?
Monty.
Monty Irvin.
Oh.
This only happens in baseball.
Yeah.
And it also goes to show that every hero has a hero. Roberto Clemente was a hero to so many, and his hero was Monty Irvin.
I love the stories, man. This is great. I wish we could go another 2 hours. So I want to talk about all the stuff you do outside of the museum, because you have the Hall of Game and you have the Hot Dog Festival.
The Hot Dog Festival coming up.
Yeah, and then
August
you do
9th.
the your golf classic too.
Yeah, the Buck O'Neill Golf Classic.
Yeah.
They had a golf tournament for me in Atlanta at the All-Star Game, the Bob Kendrick Classic, that Bob Kendrick couldn't be there because he was on the disabled list. But it was held with my friend Ryan Howard, and it was a fundraiser for the museum on the Tuesday of the All-Star Game. And so it was very successful. They raised a little money for the museum. But no, we love doing these events, these community outreach efforts. I think it's important for the museum, and it helps us stay relevant. You know, we created the Hot Dog Festival in 2013. Who knew? I had no idea that it was going to grow to become what it has become. You know, one of the most highly anticipated food and music festivals, and we had no idea what we were doing. We didn't know nothing about doing a festival. Hell, I'm not sure we still know anything about doing a festival, but we just make it up as we go along. And I just felt like we could create a quality, affordable festival in our community. And that's what we've been able to do. Now, this year, because of all the construction there in the district, signs of progress.
Yeah.
You know, there's some great changes coming to the district. We moved it to the National World War I Museum and Memorial for this year. Then we'll return it back to 18th and Vine in 26.
If you ever need anybody to sell some cigars at your events, you just let me know.
Well, we always have vending opportunities. It's going to be a great festival. I mean, it's being headlined by Silk, Eric Benet, Larry Dotson, the legendary voice of the Barcades. Also performing. Rolls Royce is coming in. The legendary Tom Brown.
Oh, man. You
Jamaican Funk.
Isn't that so cool?
Jamaican Funk.
Yeah.
Jeanette Harris and the Bloodstone Experience. We're doing a tribute to the great Bloodstone now that Harry has passed. All the original members have passed on, but they got the Bloodstone Experience that keeps the legacy of the great group Bloodstone homegrown right here in Kansas City. Keep their legacy alive. So it's going to be a great festival.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is Saturday, August 9th at the National World War I Museum and Memorial. I hope people will come out and celebrate with us.
I'm sure they will, yeah. What about the Hall of Game?
The Hall of Game we created. It celebrates former Major League greats who we believe played the game the way they played it in the Negro Leagues. So you played it with passion, you played it with high skill, but you also played it, as the kids would say, with a little swag. Yeah, you had to have that if you were going to play in the Negro Leagues. And each year we have an induction class, and we'll be announcing that induction class here pretty soon.
That's cool. That's cool. All right, this is going to be my last question, and I'm sad to have to ask because I don't want to keep. I want to keep going, but if you could go back in time, any point in time, and I don't want who you want to see, like player wise. I want to know what game would you be at if you can go back in time.
Man, I want to go back and experience the East-West All-Star Game. It was featuring the creme de la creme, the best of the best. And many say that it was bigger than the Negro Leagues World Series. And everybody's dressed. You know, Buck would say that black folks would come from as far west as Los Angeles by train, as far south as New Orleans, as far east as New York by train, converging on Chicago for this showcase event. There's nothing that compares to the pageantry of the East-West All-Star Game. The closest thing today would be an NBA All-Star Game. Those HBCU games, used to carry that kind of flavor, Grambling, Southern. But, this East-West All-Star Game, as I mentioned, going to put 50,000 people, and all the stars were there for that game. Yeah, it would be cool to be back there for that game. Yeah. Everybody dressed up, you're looking good. That would be kind of special.
Hey, I got to give it to you because you're one of the best dressed people I know. So,
when I do it, I feel like it's part of the experience. You feel like you're in costume because you go through and you look at the museum and everybody's dressed. Because that was the era of dress. So, so I enjoy it as well.
So, before we end, I guess tell people why they should come and see the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum.
I may be biased, but I think we have the best baseball history museum anywhere in the world. And I say that with no disrespect to my friends in Cooperstown, New York, that hollow hall known as the National Baseball Hall of Fame. It is incredible. It is filled with stuff. It has more stuff than will ever see the light of day. But what I love about our museum, it is not about the stuff. It's about a very powerful, compelling, inspirational story, a story that had escaped the pages of American history books. So very few folks knew anything about this story until we emerged. And that's what drives this museum. You walk through this museum, you're going to meet some of the greatest athletes to ever put on a baseball uniform. But by the time you walk away from the experience, you walk away cheering the power of the human spirit to persevere and prevail.
I can't wait to visit again. I went when I was a younger child.
You got to come back and see.
I got to come back. Yeah,
yes,
I want a tour by you. I want nobody else.
All right, you got it. You got it.
You got to be in town. I got to get your schedule.
All right, I would love to. I always look forward to doing it.
Maybe we can do a whole shop outing with my members, and we'll go out there and.
That'd be cool.
That'd be good time. But hey, I appreciate it, Mr. Kendrick. I truly do. This has been one of my favorite podcasts ever. I'm a big historian, and what better way to sit down with a historian and just listen? Like you said, just shut up and listen.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Congratulations on what you're doing here with the shop, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Of course. Thank you, my friend, and thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Make sure you follow us on all social media platforms, the Strawberry Hill Podcast, and we will check you out next week.